I guess Chad was so impervious to stab wounds that they had to put him in a completely different slasher film in between Scream movies just to see if he truly was invincible. Welcome to Box of Chocolates, where you never know what you're gonna get. Today you're getting my opinion on the new film Hard Eyes, the Valentine's slasher. Always love a good holiday horror film if it's done well, and with Valentine's Day you've really got My Bloody Valentine, the remake, and then Valentine. Personally, I'm not really a big fan of any of those. I have a lot of nostalgia for Valentine. I watched it a lot as a kid. Watching it now, it's not great. So I was looking forward to this, thinking maybe this could be the one. We could get a good new slasher icon with this dude. So, how was it? Let's go ahead and start off with the positives. I do like this mask. I like the heart eyes concept and the fact that they glow red to kind of see in the dark. I was a little unsure about the mouth at first. It's like a big smile and it's got what looks like a lipstick around it. Or maybe it's supposed to be blood, whatever. And I would still kind of like to see an alternate design of it if the mouth was smaller or a little more serious, a little more subtle. But I got used to the look as the movie went along, and I do like it. And I like the concept as a whole of a killer going after couples on Valentine's Day. It's a perfect idea for a slasher. How has that never been done until now? Maybe that's not traditionally the kind of stuff that a lot of people want to think about on Valentine's Day, but give me a slasher set on any day. I don't care. There are some good kills. There's really nothing mind-blowing, but there's some good practical effects, a good amount of blood. There are a couple that are pretty cool, a little bit inventive. There's one scene in particular where the level of carnage kind of reminded me of the cornfield party scene from Freddy vs. Jason. It's not as good as that scene, but it made me think of that. It's an opportunity for the killer to really show just them being badass out in the open, and that's something you don't really get a lot, and I really liked that. I think our lead performances are good. Olivia Holt and Mason Gooding, they're likable together. I was kind of getting invested in their romance as the movie went along, despite the constant push and pull of wondering who may or may not be the killer. I did end up wanting their romance to succeed. There are some moments that seem like they're kind of playing up some of the tropes of a typical romantic comedy and then inserting a slasher into them for laughs. Those were some of the most funny moments. Also, a few moments that seem like they're kind of playing on slasher tropes too. A few self-aware moments, and we'll talk a little more about the humor later, but there were those moments of humor that I thought worked pretty well. There were a couple scenes of decent suspense, and it's just generally always nice to see a new attempt at a slasher icon, because they're usually pretty cheap to make, and so even if the first one might not be great, they could always maybe get opportunities to improve. So regardless of my negatives, I would not be opposed to seeing more of this in the future if maybe you could do a little bit better, because overall, I actually was disappointed by this film. This is almost more rom-com than it is slasher, and I understand the romance angle. It's Valentine's Day themed, you've got to have that, but there's a good stretch where it's just that, and I think for slasher fans, who are clearly the target audience here, it might be a little bit too much. This film does not take itself very seriously. It's very goofy, there's a lot of humor, and that humor I found really bad for the most part, other than those few exceptions that I mentioned earlier. It feels very forced. There's references to Fast and Furious in my slasher? Why? This girl like rattles off a whole bunch of rom-com movie names in a whole long run-on sentence, not like listing them, but she's incorporating the names of them into her sentence, just saying movie name after movie name, and I'm like, why do we need these references? It's just taking me out of it. There are all these moments during chase scenes, during moments that should be suspenseful and serious, where the characters stop to flirt with each other or to make jokes, and it's just completely taking me out of the moment. It feels like not a slasher with rom-com elements, it feels like a rom-com, and then the slasher comes in sometimes. That changes as it goes on, but for a while, that's kind of what it feels like. And if the comedy was really good, that would be one thing, but I just didn't think it worked at all. I think it detracted from the tone that we needed to really take this killer seriously. And even though the romance was okay, it was fine, it was nothing to carry the film. you know? I will actually say, the fact that it is a murder mystery combined with a brand new budding romance did detract a little bit, even though in the end I wanted them to get together. It's inevitable that you're gonna spend a lot of the movie suspicious of most of the characters. So when our lead girl meets this guy, I'm spending like most of the movie suspecting him, just because you have to. And I think that did kind of detract from me being able to get as into the romance as they wanted me to. It took me quite a long time to really get there. The humor was definitely the worst part for me. I just didn't think that it fit. It was a little bit cringy. It wasn't the tone that I thought something like this needed. The mystery element is very weak. There is not a strong supporting cast at all. If you want to be like Scream, you gotta have the friend group. And we really don't. We mainly just have our two leads, and all of the supporting characters are really minor, and they just kind of pop in here and there. None of them get enough screen time or enough development to be interesting, to make me think, oh, that'll be a big bombshell if that's the killer. That'll be really meaningful. I don't really care who it's going to end up being among the supporting cast, because there barely is one. It often doesn't feel like there's even enough suspects of who it could possibly be, which makes part of it really obvious. And I will say there was one thing I was suspecting for a very long time that would have been the most obvious thing. They didn't do the most obvious thing, but I still guessed by the end of it anyway, because there just weren't that many options and they didn't really do a good job trying to hide it. And as for the motivation, it's lame as fuck. It actually might be one of the weakest motivations I've ever seen in a slasher. The movie's really goofy, so it's not like I ever expected there to be a really complex motive, so I wasn't really let down majorly at the end, but it was still lame. I think slasher and budding romance can definitely mix, but you either need to actually take it seriously, or if you're gonna be goofy, the humor has got to be funny. It needs to be sharper written than this, because this just felt like such lazy humor a lot of the time. Hobbs and Shaw. Their names are Hobbs and Shaw. That's not a fucking joke, guys. Come on. I wonder if there are certain things that would have worked better if it was more like a traditional slasher, because the Heart Eyes killer has struck multiple cities over multiple years. So there's no reason to think he's like close to our main characters. He's somebody that they would know. It could just be literally anybody. And I feel like maybe making it more traditional, where he was stuck to this one city, we do have a more close-knit cast of characters that we can really get to know and suspect. And I'm not saying copy Scream, but this is very clearly Scream-inspired. And there are things Scream did that it did for a reason, because they work. You got the meta humor, but when Ghostface is chasing them, they're serious and they're scared. You've got the relationship between Sidney and Billy, but it doesn't stop being a slasher movie to allow that to happen. It's incorporated into the plot, and our suspicions and Sidney's suspicions are incorporated into the plot very well. This feels like a little bit of an awkward mix of styles and tones. If the humor had just been better, we would have been fine, but did not care for that humor. It's a real shame. I am disappointed by it. I thought it was going to be a lot more enjoyable than it was. It's okay. Like, it's a fine enough watch one day for slasher fans. Like, it was entertaining enough, short enough, but it's not something I'd probably go back to, and that's a real shame. But that's all I have to say about that. Leave your thoughts on Heart Eyes down in the comments below. Did you like it more than me? Did you like it less? Whatever you think, agree, disagree. I want to hear it. I want to talk about it down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I saw this as a double feature with Love Hurts, so that review will be up soon as well. I'm seeing an early screening of Paddington on Saturday, so I'll have that review up. That's a pretty different type of movie. I don't think there's going to be any murder in Paddington. There could be. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.